Today I would like to discuss the earthquake with you in Colombia 2026, but I would like to look specifically at why one building collapsed and the other one didn't. If we look here at Plaza Bolivar in Pereira, we see here on the right side the building that collapsed, on the left side a building that's still standing. And at the first glance, the construction of these two buildings looks similar. We see here the high columns at the front here as well, with several floors on top. Let's take a look at the collapse. So here's the building on the right, other building on the left side, Plaza Bolivar, full of people escaped, and we see the smaller one actually collapsing. So why this one collapsed and the other one didn't, we're gonna figure out later in the video. First, I would like to show you some quick basics to better understand the forces out of an earthquake. So we know that the epicenter was in Los Santos, but the earthquake started actually because the Nazca Plate tried to get under the South American plate. So it dove under the South American plate, and because of this movement, the pressure increases in these deep layers, and it's looking for a weak spot. And if we zoom a bit deeper into the place where the epicenter was, it was on a depth of 100 kilometers, like 62 miles. We see around Santos some active fault lines. So these were actually the weak spot of the earthquake. So there are actually two surfaces that rupture, and that's where the movement starts, and that's what creates an epicenter. Like I said before, the epicenter was on a depth of 62 miles. If we go back to the earthquake in Venezuela, this was a more shallow earthquake on about 20 kilometers, more or less 12 miles. These kind of earthquakes are in most situations much more dangerous. The problem with deeper earthquakes is that they also spread over a bigger surface. Like we can see here, it has more time and more space to spread itself. The shallow ones spread over a smaller surface. So the lucky part of this earthquake is that it was on a deeper level. So what's also important to mention is that soil layers also have an important impact on the loads that go into the building. So when top layer consists out of rock is less dangerous than when the top layers consist out of clay, for example, like soft layers. And in Colombia, most of the cities have their foundations on top of soft soil, like Pereira, Manizales, Bogota, Cali is half of the city is on rock, other half has soft soil. Venezuela, like Caracas for example, is also on top of soft soil. So actually the most dangerous combination is soft soil with a shallow earthquake. Colombia had a deeper earthquake, but with top layers out of soft soil. One more thing, let's take a look at this model. So this is actually the epicenter on 100 meter. I added some forces. Epicenter in yellow. This is where the forces start, and they go in all directions. So also in direction of our foundations of our buildings, of the ground floors. They don't go in straight lines, they go and come in waves. But just to show you what it does, so I just added a number here. I made 1,000. It comes in waves with a load of 1,000 towards our foundation, and in the foundation it actually divides itself in two directions. So in an X direction and in a Y direction. And this is important to know because a building also needs to have stability in two directions. So now let's go back to the first example. So this was the building that collapsed. What we directly see is that this is the backside of that building. The neighboring building is higher, but it's also much bigger. I think this is the end of the building. And this building has a complete soft story at ground level, including a high ground level floor. I think we can see here that these columns have no horizontal support till the first floor. And the neighboring building has also these high columns, but directly behind that there is horizontal support. So if I copy this, we saw in the model that there are forces in the foundation. I will put them here in two directions. There will be a wall inside, I assume, but these columns almost have to do everything themselves, and they're not made to deal with horizontal forces. If we look at the neighboring building, then we see here long walls, and also this wall behind has much more horizontal capacity to deal with the forces out of the earthquake. A good thing here is that the building on the other side has much more stability. The columns are shorter. We see also more columns right next to each other. But from there we go to the next example, and that's this one. And this is the situation before the earthquake. Let's take a look at the moment of the collapse. Manizales, Colombia, see it moving and falling as well. So one similarity that we directly see with the previous one is that this building is also located at a corner. We also saw that here, building on a corner. What we see as well here is the same soft story. It's the ground level with just some columns. The rest are windows and doors. So no stability at the ground level. The neighboring building also has a lot of windows and that's not an advantage. So we know now that there are forces in two directions, so in the direction of the street and also in this direction. So building on a corner, no building giving extra support on this side or on this side. So it's actually the same problem as the previous one. Good to mention is that we're talking about a force of 1000. That's actually a static load. So if it just happens once, it's 1000, but the loads out of an earthquake are dynamic. Because it's a dynamic force, the building has to deal with higher loads. So we multiply it with 3. There's also a chance of resonance, much more complicated, but this depends more on frequency, on depth, on the type of soil, on the mass of the building, the center of gravity, and this package together can multiply the loads up to even 10. But this is in most cases with higher buildings, so we can skip that here. So this building also has to deal with loads in two directions. It's a building on a corner again with a soft story. These columns most probably gave way, so most probably these outer columns, because the rest of this building also looks like there's not much stability. Everything pushes here on this column gave way. So this column gives way and the building falls over. All right, let's go to the next one. So here we see a hospital in Cali, where we also see that the front side of the building collapses. I found a video of this building also before the earthquake. It must be one of these ones, because there was no open balcony like this one. So here is actually the same story again. The forces get into the foundation in two directions, so in the direction of the road and the direction of the building, but also the other way around, of course. So in this direction, it's actually less dangerous because it goes into the more stable part of the building. We see here, there's not really a soft story at ground level, but the rest of the floors, we can define them as soft stories, because this part of the building has no horizontal capacity. The only columns, like really thin columns that have to do the work. If this part of the building was a full balcony without the need of these columns, it would have survived most probably. So it been more like an extended floor, it would have survived. But this part of the building was really in need of these columns. If we take a look at the video again, we also see that the columns are giving way. You see here they're cracking. So no horizontal capacity and everything collapses. All right, let's do another one. So this one is really interesting. So again, the situation before the collapse. It's a 4-story building, also giving way in Pereira. So the building falls over in this direction of the road. Let's take a look. Again, we see a building located on a corner. Also, the neighboring buildings have this soft story, but this one doesn't collapse because it's supported by this building and by this building. This one has no building to support it on two sides. Plus, this building has a huge cantilever here. And again, this soft story. So we see here a piece of wall, but it's really not enough. Just here some thin columns that has to deal with all these horizontal forces out of the earthquake, plus neighboring buildings that cannot deal with these horizontal forces as well. They lean towards the building on the corner. So this one has to do double the work, and it cannot even deal with the forces itself. So here we see a house with exactly the same problem, no stability. People want to have the ground floor completely open. It can be nicer, of course, to have more light coming in or less obstacles, but not really recommendable in zones with a chance of an earthquake. The only horizontal stability that the house has is this garage here, but garage has a huge door at the front side, so as well no stability. Here at the back side there will be a wall, but that's not enough to carry the whole building, so it just falls over. And here again, a house on the corner, which brings us to this church here in Manizales. We see that this tower collapsed. So I would like to ask you guys, why do you think that only this tower collapsed and this column is still standing? Please let me know in the comments. So talking about seismic areas, if I can advise you, or if I may advise you, never buy a building or rent a floor in a building with these kind of soft stories, especially soft stories that are double the height with unsupported columns. Rather also not a building on a corner. I know there are plenty of them, but if you can, skip them as well, because they have to deal with the horizontal forces from the whole row of buildings. And if possible, try to avoid cities that have their foundations on top of soft soils. So rather cities that have their foundations on top of rocks. I know it's complicated. These kind of cantilevers, try to avoid it. I hope, by the way, that this person escaped on time. And from there, I would like to thank you for watching. Feel free to share your thoughts as well in the comments, and see you in the next video.